So if you recall the brief yesterday, you know that this is the crater that we talked about at the very end. So by the time that 2nd Platoon has their forces consolidated here in this particular crater, you've got 1st and 3rd Platoon under heavy withering fire to their east, which those rice paddies off to our right as we walked in. And Lieutenant Breckeen and Sergeant Posey and the rest of 2nd Platoon over here doing everything that they possibly can to consolidate their own position and to build their effective force of fire, their effective base of fire to repel the enemy. And if you recall, the enemy was spread out across that northern line of the terrain right there. And we talked about the portion of the enemy that starts to move south, trying to cut off 1st and 3rd Platoon and essentially outflank Bravo Company. And so it's left to Rodney and Sergeant Posey and the rest of 2nd Platoon to fight from here to prevent that enemy from flanking them. Rodney starts to direct fire from here where we're standing. And if you look at the terrain where you are, you can see how deep the crater is. You can't do it from where I'm standing. You can't do it from where any of you are standing. You've got to be able to see over the top of the crater. And we talked about as the enemy gets close enough that they're within hand grenade range and grenades start to fall within the trench line, within the crater, you got to get out. You saw how challenging it is just today to get down in this crater. They're having to do that under fire to survive. And as soon as they get out, they start taking heavy small arms fire again, and they've got to get right back in. So imagine what is going through their minds as they're fighting for their survival right now, as they're fighting just to keep the Marines to their left and right alive. And the decisions that are having to be made right now at every level of leadership, from Lieutenant Breckeen, Sergeant Posey, Sergeant Davis, down to every remaining Marine in this position, is having to do his job just to keep everyone else alive. And as the enemy maneuvers closer and closer down this tree line and the grenades become more and more frequent, we know what happened. We know exactly what happened. And so you are standing now on that hallowed ground where Sergeant Rodney Davis made the ultimate sacrifice. Made the ultimate sacrifice to keep the rest of those Marines alive. So I'm going to ask you all to please stop talking. I'm going to ask everybody to please stop talking, because what I'd really like to do is just get everybody a few moments of silence, because I want you to take it in. How powerful it is to be standing right here in this position right now. If you're a member of the Davis family, this is the piece of ground that has defined your family for generations. And you're standing here today. So please take a few moments. In the end of John Hollis's book that he wrote about Sergeant Rodney Davis, and I know most of us have read it, he quotes President John F. Kennedy, who said, "A nation reveals itself by the men it produces, but also by the men it honors." On the morning of 4 September, when 2nd Platoon, Bravo 15 Marines stepped off their fire base on Hill 51, they had 48 Marines assigned. By the time the fighting was done here, and they're able to make it back to that fire base, They had 11 remaining. And of that 11, all but 3 would fight on to receive multiple Purple Hearts of their own in the coming days, weeks, and months in Vietnam. As many of you know, we've been working on this for weeks. The Davis family for years, supporters years to make this possible. Early in this process, John asked me to be prepared to say some remarks today. And as you've all heard me say throughout this week, the most important thing we can do is make this week what the Davis family needs it to be. As a result, I've put a lot of thought into what to say out here. And frankly, there are no words to say what I'm feeling. I can't imagine what you're feeling. But I had the good fortune a couple months ago to listen to a former Navy SEAL, Shawn Ryan, say something that I felt was completely appropriate. And so I'm just going to share his sentiment with you today. Since the beginning of our country, actually since just before the beginning of our country, before the Revolutionary War, all the way through until today, standing here today, approximately 1.1 million service members have made the ultimate sacrifice for what we call America today. That's our freedom, the things that some of us still take for granted. That's our well-being, for the safety and the prosperity that we have in our great nation. And frankly, why so many people still strive to come to the shores of our nation to live their piece of the American dream. And if you take that 1.1 million and you turn it into a percentage of the U.S. population over that same time period, that number works out to be 0.002% of the total population in the history of our country. That should be the most cherished. That should be the most honored class of people to ever have existed in American history. Think about that. 1.1 million, 0.002%. That's what President Kennedy was talking about, who we honor. And that's who we're here honoring today. I think a lot of us might ask things like, how do we honor them? What can we do to honor them? And so I'll tell you this. When you go home at the end of this week and you look at yourself in the mirror, maybe you're getting ready for bed, whatever you're doing in the end of the evening, you ask yourself one question. Was I an American worth dying for today? That's how you honor them. And if your answer is yes, and you think you're doing everything that those service members that died for us would have ever wanted, you're carrying out our traditions, you're maintaining our culture, you're standing up for what you believe in, for what's right, then that's all you need to do. But you ask yourself, was I an American worth dying for today? And if we can remember just this one thing, those brothers in arms, that family that fought for each other but did not make it home, I can promise you, they do not want us carrying that weight. They don't want us living with feelings of resentment. They just want us to live our best lives. They want us to be happy, and they want us to preserve this great nation for which such a steep price was paid. I can guarantee that. And that's why they did it. And I don't know about everyone else here, but I can tell you, all of those that I know who didn't come home, they would not have wanted it any other way. It's just who they were. And that is absolutely who Rodney was. No doubt. And while that can be a tough pill to swallow, I think there's a quote that will help us all find a little bit of peace. And it goes like this. For those who fought for it, and for the families like the Davises, who know the pain of the loss of a loved one in defense of our nation, freedom has a flavor that the protected will never know. And it is absolutely a privilege to be able to say that. God bless the United States of America.